Some truths stay buried for decades, hidden in old houses, whispered conversations, and lives lived in the shadows, until one day, someone finds what was never meant to be found. I'm going to tell you the story of Claire Morrison and Rachel Bennett, her aunt's partner, the woman who had been invisible at family gatherings for 30 years, the woman who now owned everything Claire thought was hers. Claire returned to Savannah after her Aunt Margaret's funeral. She walked into that Victorian blue house on Jones Street, expecting to pack memories and sign papers. Instead, she found Rachel sitting in the living room beneath the portrait of her grandmother, and a will that changed everything. When their eyes met that first evening, something shifted. Rachel wasn't just the quiet woman who brought desserts to Christmas dinner anymore. She was someone who knew secrets, someone who looked at Claire with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because what Margaret and Rachel shared wasn't just companionship. It was a love that had to hide for 3 decades. A love that now, revealed through letters and photographs, was about to transform everything Claire believed about love and about herself. This isn't just a story about inheritance. It's a story about forbidden love, family secrets, and a woman who discovered that the real legacy her aunt left wasn't the house, but the courage to live authentically. Stay with me until the end to discover this story. See you soon. Claire's fingers trembled as she held the document, though it wasn't grief that made them shake. It was something far worse. Rage, confusion. A visceral sense that something in this house had always lurked beneath the surface, waiting for precisely this moment to destroy her. The name on the will wasn't hers. It belonged to a stranger, Rachel Bennett. Claire read it 3 times, as if the letters might magically rearrange themselves into her own last name. But no. There it was. Clear. Final. Merciless. Her aunt had left the family home, this historic Victorian on Jones Street in Savannah where Claire had grown up, raced through hallways, dreamed her future, to a woman she barely remembered seeing from a distance. A quiet shadow during her aunt's final years. Claire felt something twist inside her chest, something dark she couldn't name. Betrayal? Humiliation? Or was it something else? Something she refused to acknowledge because it meant admitting she'd never truly known the woman who raised her. Subscribe now. YouTube prioritizes subscribers, and those who aren't subscribed miss out on future stories. The parlor smelled of old wood and traces of the perfume her aunt wore, jasmine and something bitter, like dried orange peel. Claire dropped the will onto the mahogany table, where a yellowed envelope also sat, sealed with red wax. It bore no name, only a date, 1998, 26 years ago. She opened it with clumsy fingers, feeling like she was violating something sacred. Inside was a handwritten letter in her aunt's tight, nervous script. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but began with the confession. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't exist." Claire read the first lines, and her breathing stopped. Her aunt spoke of a love kept secret for decades, a love the entire house knew but no one dared speak aloud. Claire continued reading, stomach clenched, until she reached a paragraph that made her feel like the floor was opening beneath her feet. Rachel is more than a friend. She always has been. And this house, our house, is the only place where we could be ourselves. Claire dropped the letter as if it burned. She stood abruptly, stumbling over the chair. Her mind swirled with fragmented images. Her aunt, always serious, always proper, always carrying the air of someone bearing an invisible weight. And that woman, Rachel, who appeared at family dinners occasionally, quiet, polite, nearly invisible. Claire had never paid attention, never asked the right questions, and now her aunt was dead, and the truth struck her like a posthumous slap. She heard a sound in the hallway, soft footsteps, almost imperceptible. Claire spun sharply and saw her. Rachel stood in the parlor doorway, holding a cardboard box, her expression unreadable. She was a woman around 50, slender, with gray hair pulled into a low braid. She wore a simple beige sweater and dark pants. Her eyes were a deep brown, holding something Claire couldn't interpret. Sadness? Guilt? Defiance? "I didn't expect you so soon," Rachel said in a calm voice, though there was an almost imperceptible tremor in her words. Claire stared at her without responding immediately. The silence between them grew dense, heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally, Claire pointed to the will on the table. "I suppose you already know what it says." Rachel set the box down carefully and entered the parlor. Her movements were slow, measured, as if walking on fragile ice. "Yes, I know," Rachel replied, not looking away from Claire. "Your aunt told me 3 months ago, when she knew she didn't have much time left." Claire felt rage crawling back up her throat. "And you didn't think to tell me? To warn me she was going to cut me out of my own house?" Rachel pressed her lips together. For a moment, she seemed about to retreat, but instead she took another step forward. "This was never just your house, Claire. Stories lived here that you don't know. Stories your aunt protected with her life." Rachel's words echoed through the parlor like a painful reverberation. Claire wanted to scream, wanted to demand explanations, but something in this woman's voice stopped her. There was firmness there, but also something that seemed like pleading, as if Rachel were begging Claire to understand something that couldn't yet be spoken. "So, what am I supposed to do now?" Claire asked, her voice breaking. "Pack up my memories and leave?" Rachel slowly shook her head. "The will has a clause. Your aunt left very specific instructions. It says the house is mine, yes, but it also says you have the right to stay here, if you choose to learn the complete truth." Claire frowned. What truth? Rachel looked at her with an intensity that sent a chill through Claire. "The truth about your aunt, about me, about what this house really meant. But only if you're willing to listen without judging, without running." Claire wanted to laugh bitterly but couldn't. There was something in Rachel's eyes that held her there, something that challenged her to stay even though everything in her screamed to leave. She stood staring at this woman, this stranger who now owned her past, and felt something strange. Curiosity. A dark, almost dangerous curiosity. "All right," Claire finally said, her voice barely audible. "I want to know." Rachel nodded, but didn't smile. Instead, she walked to the window and looked toward the garden, where an old live oak tree stretched its gnarled branches draped with Spanish moss. "Then I'm going to tell you something your aunt could never tell you while alive. And when I'm finished, you'll understand why this house could never be only yours." Claire felt something shift in the air, as if an invisible door had just opened, and on the other side waited an abyss with infinite patience. The first lights of evening began filtering through the house windows, painting the walls a pale orange. Claire sat in the old green velvet armchair that had belonged to her grandmother, while Rachel remained standing, hands clasped in front of her. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope about to snap. "Your aunt and I met 32 years ago," Rachel began, not looking away from the garden. "I was 19. She was 26. I worked at a bookstore downtown near the SCAD campus. Your aunt came in every Thursday to buy architecture magazines, always the same ones, always at the same time." Claire listened in silence, her heart beating irregularly. Rachel spoke in a soft, almost nostalgic voice, but there was something deeper in her words, something Claire couldn't yet decipher. "One day, your aunt stayed longer than usual. We started talking about a book we'd both read. Toni Morrison. Beloved. She said something I never forgot. Sometimes loneliness isn't lack of people. It's lack of someone who understands your silence. And Rachel paused, breathing deeply. I felt like she'd read my soul. Claire swallowed hard. There was something in the way Rachel spoke about her aunt that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't affection. It was devotion. It was something Claire didn't know how to name, but that made her feel like an intruder in her own family history. After that day, we started seeing each other more often, Rachel continued. At first, just coffee. Then, walks through Forsyth Park. She taught me to see this city differently. Showed me corners I'd never noticed. The Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, River Street, the historic squares. And gradually, without either of us planning it, we fell in love. Claire closed her eyes briefly. The word resonated in her mind with unexpected force. Fell in love. Her aunt. That severe, controlled woman who never spoke of love, who never married, who always seemed to be fulfilling some invisible duty. Claire had seen her as an authority figure, never as a woman with desires, with secrets, with a heart that beat for someone. But back then, things were different, Rachel said, finally turning to look at Claire. Not like now. We couldn't be open, couldn't live together without raising suspicions. So your aunt decided this house would be our refuge, the only place where we could be ourselves without fear. Claire opened her eyes and looked at Rachel with a mixture of rage and something like pain. And my family? My parents? Nobody knew? Rachel shook her head. Your aunt protected our secret with everything she had. I came here when your parents weren't around, when you were very small. Later, when you grew up, I started coming only at night. Sometimes I'd stay until dawn, other times just a few hours. But I always came back. Because this house... Rachel paused, her voice breaking slightly. This house was the only place in the world where we could be free. Claire felt something stir inside her. She didn't know if it was compassion or resentment. Maybe both. She looked around at the walls she knew by heart, at the furniture she'd seen her entire life. And suddenly everything seemed foreign. As if the house itself had been keeping secrets now spilling out uncontrolled. Why didn't she ever tell me? Claire asked, her voice hoarse. Why did she wait until she was dead for me to find out? Rachel slowly approached and sat in the chair across from Claire. Her eyes were moist, but she wasn't crying. She simply held Claire's gaze with an intensity that hurt. Because she was afraid, Rachel answered. Afraid you'd judge her. Afraid you'd love her less. Afraid this house would stop being your home if you knew the truth. Your aunt loved you, Claire, more than you can imagine. But she also loved this, what we had. And she didn't know how to reconcile both things. Claire felt tears burning her eyes but held them back. She didn't want to cry. Not yet. There was still something that didn't fit. Something that troubled her more than her aunt's secret. And the will? Why did she leave the house to you? Why didn't she leave me anything? Rachel breathed deeply, as if preparing to reveal something even more difficult. Because your aunt knew you already had a life outside of here, a job, friends, a future. But Rachel looked down. I gave up everything for her. I gave up my family. I gave up other relationships. I gave up being visible in the world because being with her meant living in the shadows. And your aunt wanted to make it right. She wanted to make sure I had a place to stay when she was gone. Claire felt anger mixing with something more complex. Pity? Respect? She wasn't sure. She looked at Rachel and for the first time really saw her. Not as an intruder, but as someone who had loved in silence for decades. Someone who had given up everything for stolen moments in an old Savannah house. But there's more, Rachel said, looking at her seriously again. The will has that clause I mentioned. Your aunt wrote that the house would be mine, but that you have the right to stay here as long as you want. No conditions, no rent. This is still your home, Claire. It always will be. Claire felt something inside her loosen slightly. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was something. A small crack of light amid the confusion. I don't know if I can do this, Claire murmured. I don't know if I can stay here knowing every corner of this house has a story I didn't know. Rachel nodded slowly. I understand. And if you decide to leave, I'll respect that. But if you choose to stay... Rachel paused, choosing her words carefully. If you choose to stay, maybe you can know your aunt in a way you never could while she was alive. Through the letters, through the objects she left, through the stories I can tell you. Claire stared at her, feeling something inside beginning to shift. There was still rage, still confusion, but there was also something else. Something like curiosity, like a need to know. Give me one night, Claire finally said. One night to decide if I stay or go. Rachel nodded without saying anything. She stood slowly and walked toward the parlor door. Before leaving, she stopped and looked back. Your aunt saved something for you. It's in her bedroom, in the bottom drawer of her desk. I think you'll want to see it. And without waiting for a response, Rachel left the parlor, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts and the weight of a truth that had just changed everything. Claire remained seated in the armchair for what seemed like hours, though it was really just minutes. The house was silent, except for the distant sound of birds in the garden and the occasional creak of old wood. Finally, she stood and walked to the staircase. She climbed slowly, as if entering unknown territory. Her aunt's bedroom was at the end of the hallway. Claire pushed open the door and entered. The room smelled of cedar and that same perfume of jasmine and dried orange peel. Everything was intact. The bed perfectly made. Books arranged on the shelf. The antique desk by the window. Claire approached the desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a carved wooden box with floral motifs. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Photos of her aunt and Rachel, in the garden of this house, in Forsyth Park, at River Street, at the market. In every photo, her aunt smiled, a smile Claire had never seen in life. A full, authentic, happy smile. And beside her, always, was Rachel, looking at her with a tenderness impossible not to recognize. Claire felt something break inside her. It wasn't rage. It wasn't pain. It was something deeper. It was understanding that her aunt had been more than the severe woman she remembered. She had been someone who loved intensely. Someone who fought to protect that love in a world not ready to accept it. Claire slowly closed the box and held it against her chest. Tears finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something she couldn't name. Something like forgiveness. Something like acceptance. That night, Claire slept in the guest bedroom. She couldn't leave yet, not without knowing more, not without fully understanding what this house had meant to her aunt. And maybe, in the process, she'd also discover what it meant to her. Claire woke with dawn light filtering through the lace curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality returned like a cold wave. Her aunt's house, the will, Rachel, the photographs. She sat up slowly, feeling her body stiff after a restless night's sleep. The house was silent, but it was a different silence from the night before. It was an expectant silence, as if the house itself were waiting for Claire to make a decision. She got up and headed to the bathroom. Cold water on her face helped clear her mind. She looked in the mirror and saw a 32-year-old woman with deep circles and disheveled hair. She wondered what her aunt would see if she were alive. Would she see the girl who used to race through these hallways? Or would she see the woman she'd become? Someone who had built a life away from Savannah, away from family secrets. She went downstairs slowly. The kitchen was empty, but there was coffee brewing and a clean mug on the table. Beside the mug, a handwritten note. Left early to handle some business. Back at noon. If you need anything, my number's on the fridge. R. Claire felt a pang of something like relief. She needed to be alone. Needed to explore the house without Rachel's presence, without feeling like every movement was being watched. She poured coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window toward the garden. The live oak tree was covered in Spanish moss, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Claire remembered climbing that tree as a child, while her aunt shouted from the window for her to come down before she broke her neck. She smiled sadly. Those memories now had a different flavor. She wondered how many times Rachel had been in this house while she played in the garden, wondered if they'd ever crossed paths without her noticing. Wondered how much of her childhood had been marked by secrets she didn't know. She finished her coffee and decided to explore the house more thoroughly. She started in the parlor, checking the shelves full of books. Most were about architecture, art history, Southern literature. Claire pulled one at random. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. When she opened it, a handmade bookmark fell out. It was a cardboard rectangle decorated with pressed flowers. On the back, in small, careful handwriting, was a note. For Margaret, because sometimes the dead speak clearer than the living. R. 1995. Margaret. Her aunt's name sounded strange in her mind. She'd always called her Aunt Margaret, or just Aunt. Never thought of her as Margaret. A woman with her own name. A woman who received bookmarks with cryptic messages from her lover. Claire continued exploring. In the dining room, she found a china cabinet with antique dishes. Behind the plates, there was a rusted metal box. She opened it carefully. Inside were more letters, dozens of them, all written in her aunt's tight script. Claire picked one at random and began to read. Rachel, my love. Today, Claire asked me why I never married. I told her I never found the right person. And it's true, but not the way she thinks. The right person is here, beside me every night. But I can't tell her. Can't explain that love sometimes lives in hiding, that sometimes happiness has to hide to exist. I wonder what she'll think of me when all this comes to light, because I know someday it will. Nothing stays hidden forever. I hope she understands. I hope she doesn't judge me too harshly. But if she does, I'll accept it. Because at least I'll have lived loving you the way I wanted. At least I'll have been myself in this house, even if only at night. I love you, always, even when I'm gone. Margaret. Claire felt tears burning her eyes again. This time she didn't hold them back. She let them fall onto the letter, slightly smudging the ink. Her aunt had been trapped between love and duty, between truth and appearance, and Claire, without knowing it, had been part of that trap. She continued reading more letters. Some were brief, barely a few lines. Others were long, full of everyday details. The weather, the news, daily worries. But they all had something in common. Rachel's constant presence. Her name appeared in every letter like a mantra, like a reminder that despite everything, there was something valuable to protect. Claire realized they weren't just love letters. They were letters of resistance, letters of survival, letters from a woman who had decided to live her truth, even if in secret. If this doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. Hours passed without Claire noticing. She was completely absorbed in the letters, photographs, small objects she kept finding throughout the house. Every corner seemed to hold a fragment of her aunt's story, a fragment of a life Claire had never imagined. When she heard the front door open, she startled. She looked at the clock. It was almost 2 p.m. Rachel had returned. Claire hurried to put the letters back in the metal box and left it on the dining room table. She didn't know why she felt guilty, but she did. As if she'd invaded something private. As if she'd read someone's diary without permission. Rachel appeared in the dining room doorway. She carried shopping bags in her hands. She looked at Claire, then at the metal box on the table, and something in her expression softened. "You found them," she said simply. Claire nodded, not knowing what to say. Rachel set the bags on the floor and approached the table. She sat across from Claire, looking at the box with a mixture of nostalgia and pain. "Your aunt wrote those letters for years. At first she gave them to me directly. Then, when things got more complicated, she started hiding them around the house. Like it was a game. Like it was our way of communicating without words." Claire looked at her intently. Why didn't she destroy them? Why keep them if it was so dangerous? Rachel smiled sadly. "Because your aunt believed that someday someone would find them. And when that happened, that person would understand. Understand that what we had was real. That it wasn't something shameful or dirty. That it was love. Simply love." Claire felt something inside her break a little more. She didn't know if it was pain or understanding. Maybe both. "I read one of the letters," Claire admitted in a low voice. "The one that talks about me. About how she couldn't tell me the truth." Rachel nodded slowly. "Your aunt loved you deeply, Claire. But she also loved me. And that put her in an impossible position. She couldn't choose. Couldn't give up either of us. So she chose to live in the middle. In silence. In secrecy." Claire swallowed. "I don't know what to feel. Part of me understands. Part of me is furious. And part of me just..." Claire paused, searching for the right words. "Part of me just feels like I never really knew her." Rachel extended her hand across the table, stopping inches from Claire's hand. She didn't touch it, but the gesture was there, a silent offering of comfort. "You can know her now," Rachel said softly. "Through these letters. Through the stories I can tell you. Through this house. Your aunt is here, Claire. In every corner. In every object. In every wall. You just have to be willing to listen." Claire looked at Rachel's hand, so close to hers. For a moment, she considered taking it. But she didn't. Not yet. There were still too many things to process. Too many emotions she didn't know how to handle. "What did you want to happen?" Claire asked suddenly. "When your aunt left you this house. When she left that clause saying I could stay. What did you expect me to do?" Rachel withdrew her hand and rested it on her lap. She looked at Claire with disarming honesty. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me expected you to leave. To want nothing to do with this. To leave me alone with the memories. But another part of me..." Rachel paused, choosing her words carefully. "Another part of me hoped you'd stay. That you'd want to really know your aunt. And maybe, in the process, get to know me too." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in Rachel's words that went beyond simple explanation. There was an invitation there. An invitation to something Claire wasn't yet ready to name. "I need time," Claire finally said. "I need to process all this. I need..." Claire paused, feeling words catch in her throat. "I need to know if I can live here knowing every corner of this house has a story that was hidden from me." Rachel nodded slowly. "You have all the time in the world, Claire. This is your house as much as it's mine. And if you decide to stay, I promise to tell you everything. Every story, every secret, every moment your aunt and I shared here. But only if you want. Only if you're ready. Claire looked at her intently, feeling something inside beginning to give way. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something. A small opening. A crack of light amid the darkness. "Okay," Claire said, her voice barely audible. "I'll stay. At least for a while. At least until I understand what all this means." Rachel smiled slightly. It wasn't a triumphant smile. It was a smile of relief, of gratitude, of something Claire couldn't name but somehow instinctively recognized. "Thank you," Rachel said simply. And in that moment, something changed between them. It wasn't trust, it wasn't friendship, but it was something. A mutual recognition that they were both trapped in the same story. A story they hadn't chosen, but now had to live together. Claire spent the following days exploring every corner of the house. She found more letters, more photographs, more objects that told fragments of her aunt and Rachel's life. She found a silver ring hidden in a shoebox. She found a diary where her aunt had written about her fears, hopes, doubts. She found a dress stored in the closet, a dress her aunt had never worn in public, but Rachel said she put on when they were alone at home. Each discovery was like a piece of a puzzle Claire was trying to assemble. And gradually, she began to see her aunt in a completely new way. Not as the severe, controlled woman she remembered, but as a complex woman, full of contradictions, full of love, full of fear. And she also began to see Rachel differently. Not as an intruder or usurper, but as someone who had loved with an intensity Claire could barely comprehend. Someone who had given up everything for stolen moments of happiness in an old Savannah house. One evening, while Claire sat in the parlor reading one of the letters, Rachel entered with 2 cups of tea. She offered one to Claire without saying anything. Claire accepted with a slight gesture of thanks. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sound of rain hitting the windows. "Do you regret anything?" Claire asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Rachel looked at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" "This. Having lived in secret for so many years, having given up everything for my aunt. Do you regret it?" Rachel looked at her teacup for a moment, as if searching for the answer at the bottom. Then she lifted her gaze and met Claire's eyes. "No," she said firmly. "I don't regret it, because I loved, and I was loved. And that, Claire, is more than many people have in an entire lifetime. Was it difficult? Yes. Was it painful? Sometimes. But it was also beautiful. And I wouldn't change that for anything." Claire felt something in her chest loosen. There was a truth in Rachel's words that was impossible to deny. A truth that transcended pain, secrecy, hiding. "I think I'm starting to understand," Claire said softly. "I'm starting to understand why my aunt did what she did. Why she kept these secrets. Why she left you this house." Rachel nodded slowly. "Your aunt was a brave woman, Claire. Braver than anyone knew. Because she chose to love despite everything. Despite fear. Despite judgment. Despite knowing her love would never be publicly recognized. And that, to me, is the definition of courage." Claire felt tears burning her eyes again. This time, she didn't hold them back. She let them fall freely down her cheeks. And for the first time since arriving at this house, she didn't feel rage. She only felt sadness. A deep sadness for everything her aunt had to hide. For everything she could never say. For everything lost in silence. Rachel slowly approached and, without saying anything, placed her hand on Claire's. This time, Claire didn't pull away. She let Rachel hold it, feeling the warmth of her skin, the firmness of her grip. And in that moment, Something definitively changed between them. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't trust. But it was something. Something that looked like understanding. Something that looked like the beginning of something new. That night, Claire slept more deeply than she had in days. And when she woke the next morning, she knew her decision was made. She would stay in the house. Not just for her aunt. Not just for Rachel. But for herself. Because this house, with all its secrets and hidden stories, was now part of her own story. And she wanted to know it completely. 2 weeks had passed since Claire decided to stay. 2 weeks in which living with Rachel had become something routine, almost natural. They crossed paths in the kitchen mornings, shared coffee in silence, gave each other space when one of them needed to be alone. Claire had started working from home, connecting to her virtual meetings from her aunt's old study, while Rachel left to teach literature classes at a local high school. The routine established itself without either of them planning it, as if the house itself had decided how they should live together. But there were moments when Claire felt something strange, a tension she couldn't name. It happened when their gazes met for too long, when their hands brushed passing dishes during dinner, when Claire heard Rachel singing softly in the shower and felt something stir in her stomach. Claire told herself it was just the effect of living with someone practically unknown, that it was normal to feel uncomfortable, that with time, this sensation would disappear. But it didn't disappear. On the contrary, it grew. One afternoon, while Rachel was at work, Claire decided to clean the attic. It was the only place in the house she hadn't thoroughly explored. She climbed the creaky wooden stairs, opened the door, and turned on the light. The attic was chaos. Dusty boxes, old furniture, torn curtains. Claire began methodically reviewing the boxes, finding vintage clothing, deteriorated books, faded photographs. In a box marked with the year 1992, Claire found something that stopped her cold. A journal. It wasn't her aunt's journal. The handwriting was different, more slanted, more hurried. Claire opened it carefully and read the first page. Rachel Bennett's journal. If you find this, please don't judge what's written here. I'm just trying to understand myself. Claire felt she was crossing a line, but curiosity was stronger than guilt. She began reading. March 15th, 1992. I saw her again today. Margaret. I don't know why I write her name as if it were a secret, but it is. Everything I feel for her is a secret. I can't even say it out loud to myself, but here, on this paper, I can be honest. I love her. I love her in a way that scares me, in a way I didn't know existed. Every time I see her, I feel like something inside me breaks and rebuilds at the same time. It's like she has the key to something I've kept locked for years. But I can't tell her. Because if I do, everything will change. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if she's ready for that. I don't know if the world is ready for that. Claire felt the air grow denser. She continued reading, page after page, immersing herself in Rachel's most intimate thoughts, in her fears, in her desires, in her doubts. Rachel wrote about the first time she kissed Margaret, about the first time they spent the night together, about the first time they said, "I love you," in the darkness of this very house. But she also wrote about pain, about the times she had to pretend to be just a friend in front of Margaret's family, about the times she had to hide when unexpected visitors arrived, about the times she left the house before dawn so no one would see her, about the times she wanted to shout to the world that she loved Margaret, but couldn't. Claire read an entry dated 1998. Today, Margaret told me that her niece, Claire, asked why she'd never seen her with a boyfriend. Margaret lied, told her she was too busy with work, but I saw the pain in her eyes when she told me. I know it hurts her to lie to Claire. I know she wishes she could tell her the truth. But she can't. And I can't ask her to either. Because if Claire finds out, everything would collapse. The family, the reputation, everything. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. If all this hidden love is worth it. But then I see her sleeping beside me, with messy hair and a barely visible smile on her lips. And I know it is. That every stolen moment, every hidden kiss, every night in this house is worth it. Because I love her. And she loves me. And that, in a world that tells us we shouldn't exist, is an act of rebellion. Claire abruptly closed the journal, feeling something inside her break. It wasn't just understanding. It wasn't just empathy. It was something deeper. Something that made her feel guilty, ashamed, and at the same time, strangely connected to Rachel in a way she hadn't felt before. She came down from the attic with the journal in her hands. She didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know if she should tell Rachel she'd found it. Didn't know if she should keep reading or put it away and forget she'd ever seen it. But when she reached the parlor, Rachel was already there. She'd returned early from work. She sat in the armchair with a book in her hands, but wasn't reading. She was staring out the window, lost in thought. When she heard Claire coming down the stairs, she turned her head, and their eyes met. And then, Rachel saw the journal in Claire's hands. Her expression changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't surprise. It was something worse. It was pure vulnerability, as if Claire had just stripped away a layer of protection she'd worn for years. "You found it," Rachel said, her voice barely audible. Claire nodded slowly, not knowing what to say. The silence between them became unbearable. Finally, Claire approached and placed the journal on the coffee table. She sat in the chair across from Rachel, maintaining distance but feeling something invisible connecting them. "I'm sorry," Claire said. "I shouldn't have read it. I had no right." Rachel slowly shook her head. "No, it's okay, I think." Rachel paused, searching for the right words. "I think you needed to read it. You needed to understand that this wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just something casual. It was my life. For 32 years, Margaret was my life." Claire felt something in her chest tighten painfully. "I know. I understand now. And I'm sorry. Sorry you had to live like that. Sorry my aunt had to live like that." Rachel looked at her intently, eyes bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. "Don't be sorry. Because it was beautiful, Claire. Despite all the pain, despite all the fear, despite all the hiding, it was beautiful. And I wouldn't change anything." Claire felt tears burning her eyes too. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something more complex, something that looked like respect, something that looked like admiration. "How did you do it?" Claire asked, her voice breaking. "How did you bear living like that for so many years? How did you bear being invisible?" Rachel smiled sadly. "Because I wasn't invisible to her. To Margaret, I was everything. And that was enough. Sometimes, one look from her was worth more than 1,000 words of public recognition. Sometimes, one night in this house was worth more than an entire lifetime of comfortable lies. So I bore it. Because love, true love, doesn't need witnesses. It only needs to be real." Claire felt something inside her transform. She no longer saw Rachel as an intruder. Didn't see her as someone who had taken something from her. She saw her as someone who had loved with a courage Claire didn't know if she herself possessed. "Thank you," Claire said softly. "Thank you for loving her that way. Thank you for making her last years happy." Rachel finally let the tears fall. She stood slowly and approached Claire. For a moment, she seemed about to hug her. But instead, she simply extended her hand. Claire took it without hesitation. And they stood there, in the middle of the parlor, hands entwined, feeling something fundamental had changed between them. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The words from Rachel's journal spun in her mind like a whirlwind. She got up and went out to the hallway. Light from Rachel's room was on. Claire slowly approached and knocked gently on the door. "Rachel, are you awake?" The door opened almost immediately. Rachel wore a simple nightgown, her hair loose falling over her shoulders. She looked younger that way, more vulnerable, more human. "I can't sleep," Rachel admitted. "I keep thinking about the journal, about everything I wrote so many years ago, about everything I felt and could never say out loud." Claire nodded. "I can't sleep either. I keep thinking about my aunt, about everything she sacrificed, about everything she kept quiet. And I wonder..." Claire paused, feeling she was about to cross another line. "I wonder if she ever regretted it." Rachel looked at her with an intensity that sent a chill through Claire. "No, she never regretted it. She told me many times. She said if she had to live her life again, she'd choose the same thing. She'd choose me. Even if it meant living in secret. Even if it meant giving up other things. She'd choose me." Claire felt something inside her break definitively. She didn't know what it was. Didn't know if it was pain or envy or something completely different. She only knew that looking at Rachel in that moment, with bright eyes and trembling voice, she felt something she'd never felt before. "Come in," Rachel said suddenly, gesturing toward her room. "I want to show you something." Claire entered cautiously. Rachel's room was simple but cozy. A large bed with white sheets, a desk by the window, and a bookshelf full of books. Rachel approached the desk and took a wooden box from the bottom drawer. She opened it carefully and showed the contents to Claire. Inside were more photographs, but these were different, more intimate, more personal. Photos of Margaret and Rachel embracing in the garden. Photos of them laughing in the kitchen. Photos of them sleeping together in this very room. And in all the photos, there was something Claire immediately recognized. Pure love. Love without filters. Love without shame. "Your aunt took these photos," Rachel said softly. "She said she wanted proof that this was real. That it wasn't just a dream. That we existed. That we loved." Claire took one of the photos with trembling hands. It was an image of Margaret looking directly at the camera, with a smile Claire had never seen her wear. It was a smile of pure happiness, of pure satisfaction, of someone who was exactly where they wanted to be. "I never saw her smile like that," Claire murmured. "Never." Rachel approached and looked at the photo over Claire's shoulder. "Because that smile was just for me. It was her way of telling me that despite everything, it was worth it. That everything we sacrificed was worth it. If any part of this story resembles your life, the hype button helps keep it from staying silent." Claire felt something inside her completely crumble, and before she could control it, tears began to fall. They weren't tears of sadness. They weren't tears of pain. They were tears of something she couldn't name, something that looked like total understanding, something that looked like acceptance. Rachel set the box on the desk, and without saying anything, hugged Claire. It was a simple hug, without pretense, but Claire felt it was exactly what she needed. She let herself be held, feeling the warmth of Rachel's body, the rhythm of her breathing, the beat of her heart. And for the first time since arriving at this house, Claire felt truly at home. They stayed like that for what seemed like hours, though it was really only minutes. When they finally separated, their faces were inches apart. Claire could see every detail of Rachel's face. The small wrinkles around her eyes, the shape of her lips, the intensity of her gaze. And she felt something that scared her deeply. Desire. Claire stepped back abruptly, heart pounding. Claire stammered, not knowing what to say. I should go. It's late. Rachel nodded slowly, not looking away from Claire. Yes, it's late. But neither moved. They stood staring at each other, feeling something had changed irreversibly. Something neither was ready to name. Something both knew would have consequences. Finally, Claire left the room and walked back to hers. She closed the door and lay on the bed, heart still pounding. She closed her eyes, but all she could see was Rachel's face, her gaze, her smile, the way she'd held her. And Claire knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that something inside her had changed. Something she couldn't undo, something she couldn't ignore, something she would have to face sooner or later. The following days were strange. Claire and Rachel avoided each other without making it obvious. They greeted each other in the kitchen, but no longer shared coffee in silence. They crossed paths in the hallway, but no longer looked each other in the eyes. Claire spent more time locked in her room, working late. Rachel left earlier than necessary and returned later. The house, which had begun to feel like a home, now felt like a battlefield where both avoided confrontation. Claire knew she couldn't continue like this, knew she had to talk to Rachel. But every time she tried to find the right words, she drew a blank. How could she explain what she'd felt that night? How could she admit that something inside her had awakened in a way she didn't understand? One afternoon, while Claire sat in the garden trying to work, she heard the front door open and close. Rachel had returned. Claire felt her body tense. She waited for Rachel to enter the house and disappear into her room, as she'd done every day that week. But this time, she didn't. Rachel came out to the garden and slowly approached. "We need to talk," Rachel said without preamble. Claire looked up from her laptop and nodded. She closed the computer and set it aside. Rachel sat in the wicker chair across from her, hands clasped in her lap. There was something in her expression Claire hadn't seen before. Determination, firmness, as if she'd made an important decision and was ready to face it. "I know something changed that night," Rachel began. "I know we both felt it, and I know since then we've been avoiding each other. But we can't keep going like this, Claire. We can't live in the same house pretending nothing's happening." Claire felt her heart race. She wanted to deny everything, wanted to say she didn't know what Rachel was talking about, but couldn't. Because she was right. Something had changed, and both knew it. "I don't know what I feel," Claire finally admitted, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's just the effect of living here, of knowing my aunt's story, of seeing you every day, or if it's something more. Something real." Rachel looked at her with an intensity that sent a chill through Claire. "I know what I feel," Rachel said firmly. "And it scares me. Scares me because I shouldn't be feeling this. Not after loving Margaret for so many years. Not after promising her she'd be the only one. But here I am, feeling something I didn't expect to feel. Something I didn't look for. Something that simply happened." And Claire felt the world stop. Rachel's words echoed in her mind like a reverberation. Rachel was confessing she felt something for her. That it wasn't just Claire who had felt this strange connection, this inexplicable tension. Rachel felt it too. "What are you saying?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. Rachel breathed deeply, as if gathering all her courage. "I'm saying I'm attracted to you, Claire. And I don't know what to do with that, because I know it's wrong. I know you're Margaret's niece. I know this is complicated. I know this could ruin everything. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel it." Claire felt her breathing become irregular. She wanted to stand up, wanted to flee, wanted to hide from the truth Rachel had just laid on the table. But she couldn't, because part of her, a part she'd been denying since that night, wanted to stay, wanted to listen, wanted to explore what this meant. "I feel it too," Claire admitted finally, her voice breaking. "And it terrifies me. Terrifies me because I don't know what it means. Terrifies me because I feel like I'm betraying my aunt. Terrifies me because I don't know if this is real or if it's just, I don't know, confusion, loneliness, something temporary." Rachel leaned forward, not looking away from Claire. "Then maybe we should find out. Together. Without judging ourselves. Without pressuring ourselves. Just letting this be whatever it needs to be." Claire felt something inside her give way. It was terrifying. It was confusing. It was inappropriate. But it was also real. And Claire was tired of running from the truth. Tired of pretending she didn't feel what she felt. "And if this is a mistake?" Claire asked, her voice barely audible. "What if this ruins everything? What if we discover this isn't real and end up unable to even live together in this house?" Rachel smiled sadly. "Then it'll be a mistake we made together, and we'll learn from it. But at least we won't be left wondering. At least we'll know the truth." Claire looked at her intently, feeling she was on the edge of something unknown, something that could change her life in ways she couldn't predict. But she also felt something else. She felt courage. The same courage her aunt had when she loved Rachel in secret. The same courage Rachel had when she gave up everything for that love. And Claire knew that if she didn't take this step, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. "Okay," Claire said softly. "Let's find out." Rachel smiled, and it was a smile Claire had never seen before. It was a smile of relief, of hope, of something like happiness. They both stood at the same time, and without saying anything more, Rachel extended her hand. Claire took it without hesitation, and they stood there, in the garden, hands entwined, feeling something new was beginning, something uncertain, something terrifying, but also something beautiful. That night, they had dinner together for the first time in days. Rachel made chicken and dumplings, and Claire made sweet tea. They talked about simple things, Claire's work, Rachel's classes, the noisy neighbors next door. But beneath that superficial conversation, there was something more. An electric current flowing between them, an anticipation, a silent promise that something was about to happen. After dinner, they sat in the parlor with a glass of red wine each. Claire had found a bottle in her aunt's pantry, saved for special occasions. And though neither said it aloud, both knew this was a special occasion. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said after a moment of silence. Rachel nodded. "Of course." "When did you know you liked women?" Rachel smiled slightly, as if the question brought distant memories. "I always knew, even as a child, but I didn't have the words to name it. Didn't have the context to understand it. I just knew I was different. That I looked at other girls in a way I wasn't supposed to. That I felt confused when my friends talked about boys. It was only when I met Margaret that everything made sense. It was like someone had turned on a light and suddenly everything was clear." Claire nodded slowly, processing the words. "I was never sure," Claire admitted. "I dated men, had relationships. Some were good, others not so much. But I always felt something was missing, like I was playing a role that didn't fit me right. And then..." Claire paused, searching for the right words. "And then I came here, And I met you, and I felt something I'd never felt before. And I don't know if it's because you're a woman or if it's because you're you." Rachel looked at her with a tenderness that made Claire feel a lump in her throat. Maybe both. Maybe gender isn't what's important. Maybe what's important is connection. The way two people see each other, listen to each other, understand each other. And that, Claire, has nothing to do with whether you're a man or woman. It has to do with the soul. Claire felt something in her chest loosen. There was a truth in Rachel's words that resonated deeply within her. A truth she'd never been able to articulate but had always felt in some intuitive way. "I'm afraid," Claire confessed, her voice breaking. "Afraid of what this means. Afraid of what people will say. Afraid of disappointing my family. Afraid of..." Rachel approached and gently took Claire's hand. "Fear is normal, Claire. I was afraid too, for years. But I learned something important. Fear doesn't go away if you ignore it. It only goes away if you face it. And sometimes, all you need to face it is someone by your side. Someone who understands. Someone who doesn't judge." Claire looked at their intertwined hands. They were so different. Rachel's hands were larger, more weathered, with small scars that told stories Claire didn't yet know. Hers were softer, more cared for, without the marks of time and experience. But together they fit perfectly, as if they'd been designed to hold each other. "What if I regret it?" Claire whispered. "What if I discover this isn't what I want?" Rachel gently squeezed her hand. "Then we'll accept it and move forward, without resentment, without guilt. But at least you'll have tried. At least you won't be left wondering." Claire nodded slowly. She breathed deeply, feeling she was about to jump into an abyss. But she also felt Rachel was there, ready to hold her if she fell. And that, somehow, made everything less terrifying. She slowly leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their faces were inches apart. Claire could feel Rachel's breath, warm and soft, could see every detail of her face, the shape of her lips, the color of her eyes, the small scar above her left eyebrow. And Claire knew, with absolute certainty, that she wanted to kiss her. But she didn't, not yet. Because she wanted this moment to last. Wanted to memorize every detail. Wanted to remember forever how it felt to be on the edge of something new, something unknown, something that could change her life forever. "Are you sure?" Rachel whispered, eyes fixed on Claire's. Claire nodded slowly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And then finally, Claire closed the distance. Their lips met in a soft, almost shy kiss. It was a kiss that contained questions, doubts, hopes, fears. But it also contained something more. Something that looked like truth. Something that looked like freedom. When they separated, both had bright eyes. Rachel smiled, and it was a smile Claire wanted to see every day for the rest of her life. "I think your aunt would be happy," Rachel said softly. "I think she'd want this for you. Want you to be happy, to be free, to be yourself." Claire felt tears finally fall, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of acceptance, of something that looked like forgiveness, not just toward her aunt, but toward herself. "Thank you," Claire said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for..." Claire paused, searching for the right words. "Thank you for helping me find myself." Rachel hugged her, and Claire let herself be held, feeling she was finally in the right place, with the right person, at the right time. And for the first time since arriving at this house, Claire felt peace. They stayed like that for hours, embraced on the sofa, talking softly about their lives, fears, dreams. Claire told Rachel about her past relationships, about the times she felt she was pretending, about the times she wondered if something was wrong with her. And Rachel told her about her life with Margaret, about the beautiful moments and difficult moments, about how she learned to love in secret without making that love any less real. And as they talked, Claire felt something fundamental changing in her. It wasn't just that she was discovering something new about her sexuality. It was that she was discovering something new about herself, about her capacity to love, about her capacity to be brave, about her capacity to accept uncertainty and move forward anyway. When they finally went up to sleep, each to her own room, Claire knew nothing would ever be the same. She'd crossed a line, taken a step she couldn't undo. And though that scared her, it also excited her. Because for the first time in her life, Claire felt truly alive, felt like herself, felt free. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. 6 months passed. 6 months in which Claire's life completely transformed. The Savannah house stopped being a place of mourning and secrets to become a space of love and growth. Claire and Rachel had found their own rhythm. They woke together, had breakfast in the kitchen while planning their day, worked in their respective spaces, and met in the afternoons to walk through Forsyth Park or cook together. The relationship with her parents had slowly improved. It wasn't perfect. There were still uncomfortable moments, still questions they preferred not to ask. But there was respect. And there was a silent recognition that Claire was happy. And for her parents, that was beginning to be enough. One October afternoon, Claire was in the garden, pruning the live oak that had grown too much. Rachel was inside the house, preparing dinner. It was an everyday scene, almost mundane. But for Claire, it was perfect. It was exactly the life she never knew she wanted. While she worked, she heard the gate opening. She looked up and saw a young woman, about 25, standing at the garden entrance. She had a backpack on her back and a nervous expression on her face. "Excuse me?" the woman said uncertainly. "Is this Margaret Hayes' house?" Claire stood slowly, wiping her hands on her pants. "Yes, she was my aunt, but she passed away almost a year ago." The woman nodded slowly, eyes bright. "I know. I found out recently. I'm Melissa. Margaret was my mentor. When I was in college, she helped me, gave me work, taught me architecture. Her voice broke slightly. She saved my life when I didn't know what to do." Claire felt something tighten in her chest. There were so many stories about her aunt she didn't know, so many lives she'd touched. "Would you like to come in?" Claire offered. "You can tell me about her, about how she helped you." Melissa nodded gratefully and entered the garden. They walked to the house and Claire invited her to sit in the parlor. Rachel came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, and smiled at the visitor. "Melissa, this is Rachel," Claire introduced. She was my aunt's partner. Melissa smiled widely. "I knew it. Margaret talked about you," she said, looking at Rachel. "Never said your name directly, but always talked about someone special. Someone who made her happy. I always knew there was someone." Rachel sat next to Claire, a soft expression on her face. "Your aunt was very careful with her words, but I'm glad to know at least some people could see her happiness." Melissa nodded and began telling her story. She'd met Margaret when she was in her 3rd year of architecture, struggling with her grades and family pressure. Margaret had hired her as an assistant in her studio, taught her everything she knew, and given her the confidence to move forward. Melissa had finished her degree, gotten a good job, and was now designing buildings in Atlanta, and it was all thanks to Margaret. "She changed my life," Melissa said emotionally. and I wanted to come here to thank her, even though she's gone. I wanted someone to know her life mattered, that what she did mattered. Claire felt tears burning her eyes. Her aunt had been many things she never knew. Not just a woman who loved in secret. She'd also been a mentor, a lifesaver, a force for change in other people's lives. After Melissa left, Claire sat in the parlor, processing everything. Rachel sat beside her and took her hand. Your aunt touched many lives, Claire, in ways we'll never fully know. But every person who comes here, every story we hear, shows us who she really was. And that's beautiful. Claire nodded slowly. I want to do something, Claire said suddenly. I want to honor her memory, in a meaningful way. Rachel looked at her curiously. What do you have in mind? Claire breathed deeply, feeling an idea beginning to take shape in her mind. I want to turn this house into something more than a home. I want it to be a space for other people, for young people struggling with their identity, for people who need a safe place, for women who love other women and have nowhere to go. I want this house to be what it was for my aunt and you, a refuge. Rachel looked at her with bright eyes, and a slow smile formed on her face. I think your aunt would love that idea. Claire felt something in her chest expand. For the first time since arriving at this house, she felt she had a purpose, something bigger than herself, something that transcended her own story. They spent the following weeks planning. Claire used her work contacts to secure funding. Rachel spoke with her colleagues at school to identify students who might need help. They started organizing workshops, support sessions, safe spaces where people could talk about their experiences without fear of judgment. The house slowly transformed. It was no longer just a place of secrets. It was a place of openness, of community, of hope. The rooms that had been empty for years now filled with voices, laughter, stories. The parlor where Margaret and Rachel had spent nights in silence was now a space where young people gathered to share their truths. And Claire, seeing all this, felt she'd finally understood her aunt's true legacy. It wasn't just about love. It was about creating spaces where love could exist freely. It was about building refuges for those the world had left outside. One December evening, almost a year after Margaret's death, Claire and Rachel organized a small ceremony in the garden. They invited people who had known Margaret, Melissa, other students she'd mentored, neighbors who remembered her fondly. And together, they planted a new tree in the garden. A magnolia tree that Margaret had always wanted to plant but never had the chance. While digging the hole for the tree, Claire felt a deep peace. Her aunt was gone. But her spirit, her love, her legacy, lived on. In this house, in the people she'd touched, in the refuge that now existed thanks to her. Rachel approached and hugged her from behind, resting her chin on Claire's shoulder. She'd be proud of you, Rachel whispered, of what you've done, of what you've built. Claire turned in her arms and kissed her tenderly. We did it together, you and me, just like she wanted. And in that moment, Claire completely understood her aunt's true will. It hadn't just been about the house. It hadn't just been about the love between Margaret and Rachel. It had been about giving Claire the opportunity to discover herself, to find her purpose, to build an authentic life. That night, after everyone left, Claire and Rachel sat in the garden under Savannah's starry sky. Claire rested her head on Rachel's shoulder, feeling the rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her body. You know what's strangest? Claire said softly. When I came here, I thought I'd lost something. Thought my aunt had taken away my inheritance. But actually, she gave me something much more valuable. What did she give you? Rachel asked, stroking Claire's hair. She gave me myself. She gave me truth. She gave me freedom, and she gave me you." Rachel smiled and kissed her forehead tenderly. "And I gave you my heart. Something I thought I'd never give to anyone after Margaret. But your aunt was right. Love doesn't run out. It only transforms. And this." Rachel gestured, encompassing the garden, the house, everything they'd built together. "This is transformed love. Love that continues. Love that creates future." Claire felt tears finally fall, but they were tears of pure gratitude. For her aunt, for Rachel, for this house, for this life she'd never imagined, but now couldn't conceive living without. They stayed like that for hours, simply being together, feeling the presence of something greater than themselves, Margaret's legacy, the love that had existed in this house for decades, and now, the new love that was growing, a love that didn't hide, a love that wasn't ashamed, a love that existed under the open sky, free and beautiful. When they finally went inside, Claire stopped at the threshold and looked back. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow in the garden, a familiar figure standing by the live oak, smiling with approval. Claire blinked and the image disappeared. But the sensation remained. The sensation that her aunt was there somehow, proud, happy, at peace. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, noticing Claire had stopped. Claire nodded slowly, smiling. "Yes, I think my aunt just gave me her blessing." Rachel smiled and took her hand. "Then let's go inside. We have a whole life ahead of us." And they went in together, closing the door behind them, but leaving the garden illuminated by moonlight. A reminder that love, in all its forms, always finds a way to flourish, even in the most unexpected places, even in the most complicated stories, even when the world says it shouldn't exist. Because love, true love, never asks permission. It simply exists and transforms everything in its path. And Claire had finally learned that lesson, thanks to her aunt, thanks to Rachel, thanks to this Savannah house that had kept so many secrets for so many years, and now opened to the world as a testament that love always wins. Always. The following months were a mixture of consolidation and expansion. Claire and Rachel's project grew more than they'd imagined. The house became a recognized community center in Savannah. They received support from local organizations. Young people from throughout Georgia came seeking a safe space and always found open doors. Claire had discovered a passion she didn't know she had, helping others find their truth. Every time she saw someone arrive at the house with fear and confusion, then leave weeks later with a smile and renewed confidence, she felt her aunt's legacy come to life. Each story was different, but all had something in common: the search for authenticity, the need to be seen, the courage to exist fully. Rachel, for her part, had found a new way to honor Margaret's memory. She'd begun writing a book. It wasn't a biography. It was something more intimate. It was a collection of reflections on love in difficult times, on silent resistance, on how to create spaces of freedom even when the world tells you you shouldn't exist. One night, while working together in the study, Claire read some of the chapters Rachel had written. The words were beautiful, painful, and deeply honest. They spoke of nights in this very house, when Margaret and Rachel held each other in darkness, promising each other their love was worth any sacrifice. They spoke of the constant fear of being discovered, but they also spoke of moments of pure joy, of shared laughter, of dreams built in secret. "It's beautiful," Claire said emotionally. "The world needs to read this, needs to know stories like my aunt's and yours exist, that they existed, that they deserve to be remembered." Rachel smiled, but there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. I'm afraid people will judge Margaret, see her as someone who lived in cowardice rather than courage. Claire firmly shook her head. My aunt wasn't a coward. She was one of the bravest people I've known, because she chose to love despite everything. And that, Rachel, is the definition of courage. It's not absence of fear, it's acting, despite fear. Rachel looked at her intently, and Claire saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. Thank you, Rachel whispered. Thank you for seeing Margaret that way. Thank you for understanding her. Thank you for honoring her. Claire approached and hugged her tightly. I'll always honor her, because without her, I wouldn't be here, wouldn't be who I am, and wouldn't have this. Claire gestured at the space between them. Wouldn't have you. They kissed with a tenderness that had grown over time. It was no longer the nervous urgency of early days. It was something deeper, more stable, more real. It was the kind of love built day by day, with small actions and tacit promises. That night, while sleeping together, Claire had a dream. She dreamed she was in the garden, and her Aunt Margaret was there, sitting under the live oak. Margaret smiled, with that full smile Claire had only seen in hidden photographs. And without saying anything, Margaret extended her hand, as if offering something invisible. Claire approached and took her hand, feeling a warmth that filled her completely. When she woke, Claire knew it had been more than a dream. It had been a message, a confirmation. Her aunt was at peace, and that meant Claire could be too. The following years brought beautiful changes. Claire and Rachel committed in an intimate ceremony in the garden, surrounded by the people who had become their chosen family. It wasn't legal yet in Georgia, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the promise, the commitment, the decision to build a life together. The house continued being a refuge. Generations of young people passed through its doors, finding in those Savannah walls a space where they could be themselves without fear. And each of them took with them Margaret and Rachel's story. A story that reminded them love always finds a way to exist, even in the darkest times. Rachel's book was published 5 years after Margaret's death. It was titled Live Oak House: Love and Resistance in Savannah. It became an unexpected success, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. People wrote letters to Rachel, telling her their own stories, thanking her for giving voice to what many had lived in silence. And Claire, seeing the book's impact, knew her aunt's true will hadn't just been the house. It had been the story. It had been the truth. It had been the legacy of love that now inspired others to live authentically. One spring afternoon, 10 years after Margaret's death, Claire and Rachel sat in the garden, drinking lemonade and watching a group of young people who had come for a self-expression workshop. The magnolia tree they'd planted years ago was now tall and full of white flowers. The live oak continued being the garden's silent guardian, its branches extended like protective arms. "Do you regret anything?" Claire asked suddenly. Rachel looked at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" "All this, staying with me, letting me enter your life, sharing your story with the world. Do you regret it?" Rachel smiled and took Claire's hand. "Not a single second. Because this," Rachel gestured, encompassing the house, garden, laughter of young people, everything they'd built. "This is more than Margaret and I ever dreamed. It's love living in freedom. It's love creating future. And there's nothing in the world I'd change." Claire felt tears burning her eyes, but smiled. "Me neither. Not a single second." They stayed like that, hands clasped, watching the garden, feeling Margaret's presence in every flower, every tree, every laugh echoing in this house. And Claire knew her aunt had achieved the impossible. She'd created a legacy that transcended death, a legacy of love, courage, and freedom, and that legacy would continue, generation after generation, story after story, because love, when it's real, never dies. It only transforms, only expands, only becomes something greater than it ever was. And in that blue Victorian house in Savannah, under the live oak that had witnessed so much love over the years, that legacy lived and would continue living forever. Claire still didn't know the house was never the most important thing her aunt wanted to leave her. The most important was the lesson that love, in all its forms, deserves to be lived, deserves to be celebrated, deserves to be honored, and that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't shouting your truth to the world. It's living it in silence, protecting it with your life, and trusting that someday someone will find it and understand it. And when that day comes, your legacy will be complete. And Claire had found that truth, had understood it, and now was living it. Every day, with every decision, with every person she helped, with every moment she shared with Rachel. Margaret's will had been read, had been understood, and had been honored in the most beautiful way possible, with love that refuses to hide, with love that transforms, with love that creates future. If you want the continuation of this story, write it in the comments, because that's the only way I'll know what you want. And don't forget that YouTube only prioritizes subscribers. So subscribe now, so you don't miss the next story that will make you believe in love and second chances. This is just the beginning.